Stay free with me, Russell Brand.
Can I drag you back into the minutiae? Right. One of the things they said around the Nord Stream 2 pipeline is it wouldn't be possible that, like, America don't have the submersive capacity, but in truth, would America? I think it's in the Baltic Sea at a level of 200 feet. Purely hypothetically, would it be possible for a special forces team to undertake the sabotage of a pipeline?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely.
Yeah. Did you have to do stuff like that? Explosives under the water? That's sort of Navy SEALs all day long, isn't it?
I mean, it probably would have been some kind of an unmanned drone, an underwater drone that would do something like that. Why would you send a diver down there when you could send a robot?
Right, you can do that relatively easily. Thank you.
Yeah, with no risk.
Do you become cynical about those kind of do you become cynical about the way that these things are covered and reported, having a degree of understanding around how this stuff actually works?
I guess the only thing that I find, and when I see you, when I see what you post about as well, I think it's just people get stuck into one digital ecosystem in their brain. And depending on what side you're on, you either only listen to this ecosystem or you listen to this ecosystem. And there's not too many outlets that are sort of just trying to keep an open mind and listen to both sides of a story and just try and find out what the truth is. So that's what I think. And I think people in social media go crazy about things that based on some assumption or based on the ecosystem that they're living in. So I think that's pretty unfortunate. I'm not sure what's going to get us out of that, but it's pretty sad to see people that are so sucked into one methodology of thinking that you can't even really have a conversation with them. I know I have friends that are one extreme or another extreme, and it's hard to talk to them sometimes because they just don't, their mind is so closed off to hearing any other points of view. It can be very challenging to even have a discussion with them. And it's better just to not talk about it because, if you're my friend Russell and you're freaked out about something and I say, well, there's another possible viewpoint and you just get mad and started, yelling at me, then maybe I'll just talk about something else. How about the football game? Let's talk about that instead. So I think our media is definitely a problem.
But I wonder if China and Russia indeed have expansionist goals of that nature. And it's pretty clear that the United States, or at least the set of interests represented by the United States government, do have an expansionist agenda that is, causing, in my view, unnecessary suffering.
Yeah, I'm not sure, because if America had a true expansionist agenda, we would have taken over the entire world, after World War II, but we didn't. So I don't know that that's the case, or maybe there's a group of people that want to expand. I think I think China may look to expand. I mean, when you look at what they're doing inside their culture, it certainly seems evident that they're looking to expand. Obviously, Russia's trying to expand because they just invaded Ukraine. So there's some expansionists going on there. I don't think that America, I actually don't think that America has an expansionist mindset because, like I said, otherwise we would have expanded. We would have taken over everything. And we didn't. In fact, we nurtured Japan back to health. We nurtured Germany back to health where they could have their own country. That's what we've done in these wars. So I don't really think that's a piece of it. But going to something else that you said, what's scary is, you're saying, hey, with these wars that have taken place, it seems like we should have some kind of a massive social awakening. If World War I didn't trigger a massive social awakening to never have a war again, then I have no idea what it's going to take, Russell, because it wasn't, 20 years later that World War II was kicking off. This is after millions and millions of men were slaughtered for nothing. And yet you fast forward a few years and we were in World War II. So I don't know what kind of social awakening we could hope for, I'm not sure, man. I'm not sure. If World War I didn't do it, I'm not sure what will.
Well, some people would argue that the conditions imposed on Germany after World War I, in a sense, created the tensions that led to World War II. And absolutely, it was a refusal to take on board the lessons of that mode of 20th century imperialism that led to, another pretty awful conflict. With regard to American expansionism, some would argue that unlike the forms of colonialism that preceded it, like British colonialism, where it was all flags and crowns and jewels and people marching about, that it was undertaken in a more invisible and economic form through like a trade and corporatism and relationships between like the countries that have even been listed in this conversation are somewhat bound by an agenda that's ultimately beneficial to American corporate interests, whilst I'm not suggesting that ordinary American people in any way benefit from whatever economic ties resist as a result of the treaties between America and Japan, say, or any of the other nations. And like, speaking as a British person, ultimately, after the Second World War, there's certainly an argument for saying we became a sort of de facto state. And whilst we very much cherish what we still call the special relationship, I think it's pretty clear who's at the front and who's at the back, as it were, in that particular loving cuddle across the Atlantic. So like really, like I suppose when I'm talking about a spiritual awakening, what I feel like is when you talk about, you know, people that would be willing to, at a drop of a hat, come to your aid, or people that are willing to confront the absolute necessity for sacrifice, people that are willing to undertake the kind of suffering that I've heard described in what is, you know, as I understand, known as Hell Week in the Navy SEALs, that kind of discipline, that kind of willingness, that kind of capacity for human greatness played out without the kind of framing of the sort of cultural and economic model that it currently lives within, could lead to different systems, if not perfect ones, better ones, different types of leadership. If we had leaders that lived by the accord that you have described as being the creed of the Navy SEALs, like leaders that were about sacrifice and service rather than the fulfillment of lobbyist agenda or corporate agenda and sort of puppet governments, that for me, that would be the one way of instantiating sort of governmental change, both a spiritual and practical kind of change. But that's not really a question, Jocko. That's more of a wishful announcement that I'm making.
Watch entire episodes on demand for free at rumble.com/Russell Brand.